Welcome to The Feed, powered by Loblaw. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. We conceived of The Feed podcast as an opportunity to showcase thought leaders, tastemakers, innovative food and health brands, and yes, a few key Loblaw executives who are making a difference in the grocery and health industries, together helping Canadians live life well. What happens when an advertising creative director becomes obsessed with building the perfect pickle? On this episode, I sit down with Chris Hobson, founder and CEO of Hobbs Pickles, to explore how a simple idea, bringing authentic New York-style pickles to Vancouver, turned into one of Canada's most exciting emerging food brand stories. From a popular tasting bar at Granville Island to national retail expansion, this is a story about craft, brand architecture, and building a cult following with your first 1,000 customers, one crunchy bite at a time. Chris, welcome to The Feed. How are you?
Excellent.
It's great to be here. You and I just spent some time at the pickle bar. I've tasted heaven. I mean, they're just a fantastic product. So I want to learn all about. Now that I know the product, I want to learn all about the business. So, where'd you grow up? Are you around from these parts?
Originally from Toronto. Came from advertising. Mm-hmm. Worked in the advertising industry for about 17 years. North America at award-winning agencies as an art director, creative director.
I can see that in the branding. I mean, either you hired somebody really savvy, or you definitely have a flair for it. Sets it apart.
Yes, it's graphic design was kind of it was sort of a labor of love, and everything from the labels to the the neon sign with the bitten pickle, the outfits. Even
the font you chose, I find very, very contemporary and different, right?
Thank you.
Than other folks in your category. So it's very thoughtful behind that, I think.
Yes, there's really an element of how to be progressive in a category that's very old and it's got a ton of history, and when you see labels, you see something that just says old world. I think the idea really started with coming to Vancouver and just not having a good tasting pickle. And I lived in San Francisco, lived in New York. I could get great pickles there. It's just something.
Now, were you always most people don't chronicle where they live based on how good the pickles are. Were you always a big pickle fan? Is that a thing?
It's funny you say that. My wife reminded me recently about how when we travel, I'm always trying to get like a secondary fridge for the hotel room. Because I'll find something and I'm like, oh, we gotta bring these back to the hotel. You think there's room in the bar fridge, because it's just a thing. Like, I've been obsessed with it unconsciously for so many years. So when I got here in BC, it was like, man, I'm really missing this. This is something I don't have here. So that was kind of the impetus for the idea. At the very least, if it fails miserably, I'll have a great big supply of pickles that I love.
So I want to understand the journey from art director, and we've talked about where you wound up and how you wound up here, to someone who's got product on the shelf of a major grocer like Loblaw. So talk about the origin story of the business. And it's one thing to be obsessed, as am I, among flavors. Another thing to start a company. Talk me through that.
I think it was this concept of okay, want to bring pickles here. How does it start? Spent a lot of time at Granville Island because we lived here, like right nearby here, and just started mulling over the idea of, I'm used to presenting these big brand concepts, to clients in advertising. It's always been just part of my brain that I'm always coming up with ideas for things, and presented this concept to Granville Island. And just said, look, this is something that I see being like a national brand. They thought it was just cooking in your kitchen, this little cart that I wheel in every Thursday. And I said, no, this is a concept. So I presented the full deck to them with drawings on.
I was going to say, you have art boards.
Pickle tasting bar, had it all drawn up, had, the outfits, photography references, all these old deli shots from, these sort of prideful owners in New York from the 50s, the pickle barrels in the Lower East Side you used to see on the streets that, back in the day people were like, filling their containers barehanded, but it really evoked this whole experience of how do I create that here? How do I create this thing that's not just, hey, I want to buy a jar of pickles. It's what's going on? They've got pails back there. They're packing pickles by hand. They are presenting what's with the black ties and
something interesting
the
is
white
happening over
shirts
there.
and. We're kind of like the reservoir dogs of the pickle industry. We just have this sort of air about us where we're trying to deliver this premium experience, and it goes a long way. There's, Pickle Fest, we did that this year, and interestingly, we got a ton of compliments from people just saying, wow, you guys really stand out. Like, what's your deal? And they're coming over looking at us and asking questions, and they're trying the products, and I think that that energy and that enthusiasm really just comes out in our entire team here and just how we present it.
You know what? I want to get to this a bit later, but it's one thing to have that physical presence so well thought through. It's another thing to try to convey that on a shelf in Toronto, or Mississauga, or wherever it is across the country. So I want to hold that thought. I want to get there. Let's talk about the product a little bit. So you and I were going back and forth on email, and you were telling me a little bit about the process behind your product. Now, they're not, what do you call them, a New York taste and a West Coast vibe. Now, what does it take to get that New York taste?
Having that experience of, sort of an East Coast feeling, an East Coast taste, and trying to bring that West, when the business started, it was, who can make these products for us? I knew we wanted a lot of flavors. It had to have the right amount of crunch. It had to be the right size cucumber. It can't be overpowering. We don't want something that's got a lot of ingredients in the jar. Like, it's got to be really simple, really smooth. It's an elevated experience. So met with, some of the original pickle making families that are still doing this. I mean, there's not a lot of them left, and said, look, here's this thing we want to do. And that's kind of how it all got started. And we've had a solid partner, in New York since we opened in 2017.
Okay.
Now that's, part of that is by design in the sense that, I knew this wasn't going to be just some small operation, right? We wanted to be able to reach all of Canada. And, these things, I knew they didn't happen overnight, but I wanted to at least set the stage for that. I wanted to ensure that if there's ever an order coming in, we're never going to have an issue putting product on a shelf anywhere. That was really important to me because, if this idea is what I plan for it to be, this thing, it should be, more than nationally. It should be going south of the border, and as many of our customers do, they take them all around the world and keep coming back for them. So it's really kind of created this universal message of, what makes that sort of crunchy New York deli taste. And we've really occupied that space.
You've captured it so well. And so walk me through, as you thought about the business plan, the physical presence here, you've articulated that. But as you looked at the grocery shelves across the country, they're full. There are products similar to yours, i.e. pickles, on the shelf. Where did you and how did you perceive that there was a space? When you go to talk to the Loblaw category manager, said, you need this on your shelf because it's different. How? I mean, one thing, it's refrigerated. Some are just shelf stable. But talk me through your execution of that or your articulation of that to the folks at Loblaws.
Well, I would say two things. One is that we had many of the buyers coming to Granville Island, from the minute we opened until we hit the grocery store shelves. These were people that were handing me business cards. Remember when people used to have those?
Yeah.
They're handing me business cards saying, call me when you're ready. And a lot of people that really believed in what we were doing that got us set up early and said, when you're ready, we want these products on our shelf. That word of mouth went from one large retailer to another through like a couple of deli managers that are talking to each other on lunch from two entirely different retailers.
Right.
I feel very grateful that we have all these customers everywhere that are like brand ambassadors. It's kind of like we have this whole team on the streets. They call me and tell me, they're like, look, I've already talked to my my local deli manager. We have to have you. Do you have a distributor? And they write me on Instagram, they write on the website. It's amazing how much the brand has traveled word of mouth.
Would you say that pickles are having a moment? It feels like there is a moment. I mean, even people learning how to brine their foods. And they're starting to be very, I feel, adventurous and looking for something different. I mean, pickle flavor, we were talking to the Mark from Twigs, and one of his most successful, boldest flavors is pickle. So it feels like it's having a moment, like right place at the right time, kind of a little bit, though, the harder I work, the luckier I get in your case. But it feels like the category is having a bit of a moment. Would you agree?
It's an interesting question because, when I think about how many people we've talked to that do their own pickling, that come over and say, hey, how did you do that? What's the secret? It's been this thing that is universal, right? From the toddler trying their first pickle at our pickle tasting bar to, the 97-year-old that comes every week with this woman that helps him and says, kosher dills, like we just know what he wants. We put it on the counter for him. It's a universal thing that everyone relates to, they get excited about. So I think there's so much rooted history in pickling that it's almost like this unconscious thing with people. They walk by the pickle tasting bar, they do this little dance, they say, my mouth is watering, and they're like, and they hear someone say pickles, and it just stops people in their tracks.
As I was sampling, I just was watching the number of people coming by and was just drawn to the booth. Some looked like they had been here before and trying new flavors. Others were just like, what's going? As you said, what's going on here? There's, and what I'm really interested in is how you plan to convey that on the shelf, right?
Yes.
It's a big leap. Obviously, the packaging is going to carry you to a degree, but how do you wrap social media around it? How do you evoke that same feeling as you kind of go national and fulfill your ambition?
It's a great question because we can't physically be standing there with these black ties on, right, with these white shirts and green aprons. This is something that it has to live on its own. And when you think about Granville Island as, it's the ultimate focus group. I mean, we literally are like this international destination, that deals with millions of people. We're getting everyone from such a cross-section of this planet visiting here that if something doesn't work or somebody doesn't connect with something, we learn pretty quickly. Part of this too is how we communicate that information to the customer and what they play back to us. Coming up with new names. I love this part because it's the part where I think one day we had this really, large cucumber batch that arrived, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with these? They're supposed to be half the size, and we had, another flavor that we were working on, and I said, what if we just start calling these the Big Dill? And so suddenly everyone walking by the bar is like, oh, I got to try the Big Dill. I got to try the Big Dill. Like it's this thing that happens with people where you have the ability to tap into something that they connect with. So, with that. With all of that information that we get from our pickle tasting bar, it helps us narrow down and translate what does that mean on a shelf where you've got no emotion, you got someone with zero time, you got somebody who's just like impulse reaching and grabbing. The simplification of the idea and just doing one thing really, really well was so important to how this all began. People ask, do you do pickled onions? Do you do pickled tomatoes? That's a real New York thing. Do you do pickled, what was the other day? Someone said, do you do pickled salami? And it's like...
If you're good at pickling, you must be good at all these other things.
And I tell them it's just cucumbers.
It's a study and focus, right?
Yeah,
it's a study and focus.
Do that really, really well. And so having that narrow focus, simplifying a brand, making it, in an environment that's just like... enough to cause, attention deficit, you definitely have an opportunity to stand out and build a piece of real estate on a shelf that gets people's attention.
And I guess with your background, you're thinking forward as to what shelf talkers look like, as you start to expand and talk about a little bit more about the journey to Loblaw's.
It's interesting because we started in BC technically with all the independents, like the city markets. Had some real cheerleaders here that some of our first customers where I would be driving the van delivering the pickles. Real believers in what we were doing, and also you'll find that you get along with people who love pickles. That's the other thing in this business. And so I've made so many connections in the food business of others that love pickles just because we have this immediate commonality. And so with that, you get people talking. So Ryan, one of my friends here in BC and longtime customers, he was a franchisee owner and just started talking and it's like, oh, you got to talk to Brad and you got to talk and already we were poised to set up in Ontario. We were dealing with a lot of the higher end grocers, right, like the Summerhill Markets and Fiesta
specialty
Farms,
guys,
guys. So it was an easy fit for us, and that conversation got rolling. And as all this is happening, while we're launching our jars, in Ontario and really kind of pushing now in a bigger way. We're also innovating, and we came out with our pickle pouches, which it's a smaller snack size, grab and go, brineless, and we've got our sweet horseradish and our dilly chips. We're building that line out. I'm super excited about it. I feel like, in a world where you're looking at a shelf and you're seeing a large jar of pickles, there's a lot of people that aren't ready to commit to that many pickles, I mean, we have this thing at the bar called a taster size, and it's literally just that. It's like you get like 4 or 5 pickles, and people that are kind of dabbling in the gourmet pickle world are like, well, give me one of those and one of those, and then they'll just try it. But there is a graduation that happens, and so the pouches is really an opportunity for us to share it with all of Canada. It's like saying, oh, I know that brand. Oh, great! I can just eat this as I'm walking to my car.
It's like a gateway.
Yes.
A gateway to the rest. The pickle category in general, I know for the past couple of years, has been kind of upended a little bit, right?
Yes.
Some big brand names that you and I would know, that people would know, have kind of gone away. What's going on in the industry from your perspective? Is it reached some kind of crisis for one reason or another? And I know the pickle farmers, I was talking to a pickle farmer or cucumber farmers, and they're really worried because they have a very limited season, and suddenly there's a lot of disruption. What do you make of the disruption, and how do you think the industry's headed, or where do you think the industry's headed? Because I guess it feels like for you to do well, the pickle industry needs to do well as well, right? So you kind of find your place in it, but it feels like kind of a disruptive place right now.
It's disruptive in the sense that some of these big names left the shelves over the past couple of years with everything going on, and I think it's just given us an opportunity, certainly as a Canadian brand, and a lot of other Canadian brands to be prideful about what we're doing, and it's suddenly you end up with this. You get people that are looking a little bit deeper into, what is it that I can support in Canada, and so a lot of those customers that are discovering us now, we're giving them essentially more opportunity to discover us. The ones that haven't been to Granville Island, the ones that are still, writing and saying, "Where have you been all my life?" And they'll post these pickles on, their Instagram account as if it's, lovingly, like you mentioned, you made a potato salad. They're making their potato salad and the whole video, and it's amazing just how excited people get about it.
What's your advice to retailers and the people you work with in terms of kind of creating that momentum in a store? I'm coming back a couple of times to the same thing, which is you've kind of nailed it here, but it's not a model that kind of always kind of translates into the mass setting. But what are the kind of 1 or 2 things that need to happen for them to be successful when they're selling your product?
There's certainly an element of sharing information as it relates to brine, the brines, the pickles that pair with other things. I mean, we have these cheat sheets that we provide, to deli managers.
You were telling me there's a wine. Who was it from? Visited?
Yes, it was the sommelier from Earl's Restaurants did a wine pairing here, and
I love that.
And it's this whole idea that there's a whole story behind each one of these products, and so I think the story is really what it comes back to. It's how do you tell this story, and a good story, if it's told right, people remember it, and I think that this is one of those stories that it's a small brand that started at Granville Island, that really connected with a lot of people, and that really grew beyond that because of all of that word of mouth, because of all of that interest in what we do. So many of the retailers we work with, I think it's important that we educate them on things like pairings, so that if there's a shelf placement opportunity right next to, let's say, some charcuterie or some cheeses, that's going to immediately, up the sales because of that placement.
Right.
Having, just having it in a certain part of the store where, even something as simple as the lighting makes a huge difference. There's elements of the pickle world that, you kind of learn about that, even every day I'm learning something new. I've been doing this now for almost a decade, but it's a very humbling experience.
Last question, and then I kind of ask you what's next. So let's talk about marketing. As I listen to you, it reminds me of that saying, people buy the story before they buy the brand. So you're kind of an epitome of that. But as you think about the overall, you're small, innovative vendor, you got to move, you got to pull a lot of levers to be successful. What's working for you? Are you on the Instagram, the social media, the influencer? You've got sampling and you've got this physical presence. But I guess it's also, as you share that, what's your advice for people who are like you and want to grow a business? But what are all the moving parts that you put together to make it successful and are going to?
It's many things. I think the main vein, I would say, would be, just be able to tell your story, right? Be able to tell your story really well. Communicate that in various mediums. Stick to the storyline. Right? Don't deviate from that. Don't start doing, if you're doing, cucumbers, don't start doing olives. Right? Just stick to that one thing that you're really good at. And I think just repeating that over and over is a really simple way to continue that story and to
in
grow
any
a business
medium, whether it's
medium.
Instagram or TikTok or YouTube.
Exactly.
Any one of those working better or worse for you? I'm just kind of thinking about as people like yourself are listening and like I can't do it all, but what would you recommend they focus on?
I think from a founder perspective, from someone who's starting something, they have to work on first of all, their business is also who they are, right? And they have to work on their personal brand. They have to be able to tell their story and then also be relatable in some way, to say what is it that motivated them to start. Be open and be humble, and don't try to mask who it is that you are or what you're trying to do. Have a little bit of you're not there, there's imperfections, and don't hide those imperfections.
The word authentic comes to mind.
Authentic is
kind of anchored to
yes.
like a foundational principle of the brand, right?
Being authentic.
Tell your story in like LinkedIn. I guess LinkedIn is a great place to tell your story from the business context, and choose other places, right?
I think the personal brand aspect of what Hobbs Pickles is. I mean, certainly my name is on the door, so I want to ensure that if I am Hobbs, that I'm living true to that. And if you'd see my all the fridges I have at home,
right,
you'd say, oh well, that must be Hobbs.
Was that always the way it was going to go? Did you always want it to be Hobbs Pickles, or did you have other names in the queue? Was it always?
It's at the very beginning. There were a number of other variations that I had. I could share all the designs I did. Unbelievable amounts. 50
storyboards later. Yeah.
At the very beginning, I had a business partner. Used to be Kalin and Hobbs. As any business partnership develops, we kind of did our own thing. He did his, and I'm doing mine. But at the end of the day. I think that it's the concept of what I'm doing and the concept of being able to tell this story differently, to be able to engage with, with those retailers.
Anchored to a real person.
Yes.
Your story.
Yes.
It's a pretty big differentiator, I think. If you think of table stakes and differentiators, right? Your table stakes got to have a great product, and then you start thinking about differentiators. What's next? What's next for you and the brand? You've talked about some line extensions, but how do you think about what's next in the next couple of years?
I'm kind of in this really ambitious stage, and I see all of Canada distribution and all the majors. I think that's just inevitable. I have my sights on much bigger things, beyond club, beyond Canada, in the U.S. I know that this is a very shareable story, and it's certainly something that a lot of people are like, they really love what we're doing, and we have a bit of a cult following, and so having those phone calls late at night from, the woman who's coming in from New Jersey and she needs her full sours before she drives to Whistler, I still answer the phone, right? So I want to be able to continue that as much as possible.
Yeah.
The connection with the customers, as you can see when you're standing at the pickle tasting bar, I mean, that's everything, is being able to communicate.
You got a great team there.
Idea.
Your team's really engaged.
I'm so happy with our team. Great people, super positive, and it just makes it's not. This isn't. Believe me, it's not a job. I love what I do. It's pretty cool.
Well, Chris, fantastic to spend time with you. Thanks so much for making time for me here at Granville Island, and congratulations on what you've achieved already, and I wish you continued success. And I'm a big fan both of the product and the story, so congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that. My pleasure. Absolutely. And we'll have to get you some pickles.
Oh yeah. I'll sign up. I got a suitcase. I check luggage.
Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, be sure and follow us and give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends and colleagues all about us. New episodes of The Feed, powered by Loblaw, will show up regularly on your favorite podcast app and on our YouTube page, where you can watch the full video of each episode at The Feed, powered by Loblaw. I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant, keynote speaker and producer, and host of a series of retail trade podcasts. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.